And as you can see, Yehuda is currently a professor and about to be head of department of the Seymour Fox School of Education at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Now, as Yehuda and I have spent time together here in Okinawa, I've discovered that we have more similarities than differences. We both trained as clinicians. We're both passionate about research in ADHD, and we both have PhDs in relevant fields. So prior to doing his PhD, or during the time he was doing his PhD, Yehuda worked with a geriatric or elderly population. After completing his PhD, he did an about turn and worked in pediatrics, but he completed a PhD in neuropsychology and psychoneuroimmunology, also at the Hebrew University. After that, as I say, he went back to clinical work where he worked with children, and that's when he really became acquainted with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this has been his passion for the last 15 to 20 years in terms of his research. So over the past 15 years or so, his research interests have focused on understanding the tendency of children, adolescents, and adults with ADHD to make what we might call suboptimal decisions, not always making the best choices. And it's a pattern that's reflected in higher rates of risk-taking behaviour, in procrastination, reduced capacity to delay gratification, like we want it now, not later. And sometimes it's been also in disordered eating and antisocial behaviour. And I think one of the things that Yehuda also experienced was kind of the low adherence that you sometimes saw to the COVID-19 requirements. And so that is kind of, I guess, if you like, shaped his research, and he's going to share that research with us today, as well as looking at, what could be the underlying mechanisms, but also what it means for how we actually support individuals with ADHD, or how we manage our own difficulties with decision making. So Yehuda, I'm going to stop talking because I could make the introduction last about 30 minutes probably, but I will hand over to you now. I don't know if you want the big microphone or, oh no, they've wired you up. Okay. Well, as I say, I'll stop talking. But I just also wanted to thank the TVSP program. Yehuda has been an affiliate of that program, and we're very grateful to the support that that program has provided towards us. So Jonas, thank you very much, and to your team.
Thank you, Gail, for the very warm introduction. Thank you, TSVP unit and OIST in general for the invitation and the hospitality. Coming from Jerusalem, I do not want or cannot ignore the horrible things that are happening these days in the Middle East. Numerous innocent Palestinians are suffering from hunger and displacement, and are being killed every day. Dozens of Israelis have been held captive under terrible conditions for more than 700 days. Meanwhile, democracy, the rule of law, and civil rights in Israel are under severe threat. Most of the Israeli academic community, including myself, have been constantly protesting and calling on the Israeli government to end the war, reach a deal for the return of the hostages, and uphold democratic principles. Okay. So moving straight to this talk. This is the outline. I'll start with the definition of ADHD, and then try to compare or relate ADHD to self-control or lack of self-control, and then suggest a framework or decision-making framework to study self-control, and we'll ask or we'll use this framework to study ADHD-related self-control and suboptimal decision-making. And finally, I'll try to connect this with the tendency or the observation that people with ADHD have higher intra-individual variability in several domains, and hopefully try to suggest some implications. Okay, so ADHD is characterized by a persistent behavioral pattern of age-related excessive inattention and/or hyperactivity, impulsivity. It should begin during childhood and also should impact negatively on functioning, which is usually defined in terms of social, academic, and occupational functioning. What exactly is inattention and hyperactivity? So there are some quite agreed or actually agreed operationalization of this concept. The inattention means distractibility, careless mistake, daydreaming, concentration problems, following instruction problems, disorganization, avoiding mental effort, losing things, forgetfulness. Hyperactivity means fidgeting, leaving seat, and also excessive talking, which is maybe not so trivial. And impulsivity means blurting answers, trouble waiting turn, and interrupting others. The picture is quite, again, agreed. What is less agreed is what is the cause, or who should we blame. The medical model sees ADHD as a disorder, just like any other medical condition. And then the focus is on the individual, looking for genes, some neural circuits, cognitions, motivations within the individual that cause him or her to be inattentive or hyperactive. The social model or the neurodivergent model sees these behaviors as normal. And the problem comes or is caused by expectations provided by the society or family or some other contextual challenges. My talk is quite neutral for these questions, but it will more be focused on the individual, not only. Another debate or a question is whether it is better to conceptualize ADHD as a category, either you have it or not, or a dimension, so everybody is somewhere on the spectrum. And I will use both definitions or both conceptualizations. So sometimes I will show data from people with ADHD compared to people without ADHD, and sometimes I'll show data from the general population with ADHD as a continuous variable. Okay, this is my nephew exercising this self-control, and the link between ADHD and self-control dates back, I don't know exactly to when. The oldest resource I found is by Dr. Wunderlich, who wrote in 1967 that hyperactivity represents an absence of control over oneself or a breakdown of control over one's behavior. 30 years later, Russell Barkley published this very influential book contending that ADHD has much to do with executive dysfunctions and specifically lack of self-control. This is a title I really like. I mean, it turns out that ADHD is a paradigmatic disorder of self-control. Okay, so some people really think that these concepts are related. If we go to the other side, the self-control literature, so this may be the most popular scale or most popular tool for reporting self-control. And here are 4 items from this scale, which are actually very similar or identical to some of the characteristics of ADHD. Okay, so here is a list of concepts that either define or correlate with self-control. So people with high self-control are able to inhibit their impulses. They are more perseverant, they invest effort, they foresee future outcomes and act proactively accordingly. They regulate their emotion, they engage in health promoting behavior, they abide the law, and they are more cautious. Whereas people with ADHD, compared to people with high self-control, are impulsive, distractible, avoid investing effort, are described as having temporal myopia, so just looking or considering taking into account only immediate rewards. They are not proactive, they procrastinate very often. Their emotions are not regulated, so they're more anxious, more irritable, sometimes more aggressive. They engage in unhealthy behaviors like smoking, unhealthy diets, sedentary lifestyle. They are more often engaging in delinquency and in excessive risk-taking. Some of my lab members made contribution to this literature. For example, Ruth Netzer-Turgeman studied the procrastination in the general population and showed a nice correlation between the level of ADHD and the level of procrastination. Shirley Hershko started with self-report. She asked students to self-report on using the food frequency questionnaire on exactly what they eat and how much they eat of every food. And then she analyzed the data, finding that people with ADHD don't eat less or more than people without ADHD, in contrast to some of the literature, but they consume the same amount of serving and calories, but from less healthy food. We know that the self-report is subject to bias, so she ambushed actually students at the cafeteria, and if they consented, she asked them to just to show her what they bought, and she divided the foods to more healthy and less healthy foods. It's a cafeteria after all. And she found that people with ADHD and students with ADHD bought much more less healthy food compared to controls. This is a study that Gail mentioned. We found that ADHD symptoms correlate negatively with adherence to preventive measures instructed during the COVID pandemic, less mask wearing, maintaining physical distance. This is a study on various forms of delinquency, both minor and major delinquency and other forms of antisocial behavior, and ADHD predicted higher levels. Of course, there is much variability, and many people with the ADHD have nothing to do with delinquency, but on average, there is this link. Rachel Shoham developed the adult risk-taking inventory and showed that adults with ADHD reported higher likelihood of engaging in 40 forms of risky behavior. Ruba Das Othman studied risky behavior in Eastern Jerusalem among Palestinian students in Eastern Jerusalem. The Eastern Jerusalem educational system is very much or profoundly under-resourced. So actually the rates of dropout, substance use, delinquency are very high. And she could show that even in this at-risk population, ADHD is still a central risk factor for risky behavior. Finally, this is a relatively new study by Nathalie Guetta, who longitudinally tracked risk-taking and ADHD symptoms along a year, many time points, and she she used this RICLPM designed to differentiate between and within participant effects. And the main finding is that there is a very stable, or there is a stable between participants correlation between risky behavior and ADHD symptoms, but the longitudinal effects, the cross-legged effects, are not so high and almost always not significant, which suggests that the link is, I mean, that both ADHD and risky behavior share a common mechanism, and they do not just cause each other. Okay, so it's about time to ask what exactly, or what in fact is self-control. So I took here 3 definitions, and they all share much in common. They all see, I mean, they share a picture of an internal conflict, and self-control is something, an ability or restraint or quality that people use to control themselves, to regulate, and to affect, to cause something to themselves. It's not such a simple definition, and one of the problems is that so if we ask why someone smoke, the answer will be because he lacks this thing that we call self-control. Yeah, but we actually, what we did, we used smoking as a measure of self-control. Yeah, so I'm asking, why are you don't have self-control? And the answer is because I'm lack of self-control. Yeah, so it's in other words, homunculus accounts are not very helpful. So luckily, I came across this paper by Berkman and Michael Inslich, and they suggest, I think, indeed a radical thesis. First, they say something like self-control is a description of a value-based choice, and it's not something that causes the choice. Yeah, this is a description of the choice. And actually, I mean, self-control conflicts feel very different from other value-based choices. Yeah, but it should not distract us from analyzing this phenomenon using the same tools. So if I want to analyze a choice between an apple and a high sugar, high fat cream cheese cake, okay, so I have to do it just with the same manner as I'm analyzing a choice between an apple and an orange, okay, and just that in in the case of apple and a cake, and a choice of a cake, we call it self-control choice, yeah, but it's actually based on the same mechanisms. And how choices are made. So if I have two options, I somehow calculate the subjective value of each option, and usually, not necessarily always, but usually I choose the option with a higher value. And how values are computed. First, it depends on the objective value of the possible outcomes. I mean, the focus is on the outcomes, and the objective value is, of course, very important, but not only the objective value of the outcome, but the probability of the possible outcome, the immediacy of outcomes, and the cost that is involved in choosing this option. So now we have more concrete or more easily operationalized concept of what self-control or lack of self-control is. So self-control means actually that you minimize some very popular bias. For example, risk-seeking. Risk-seeking is actually underweighting the probability of losses. Yeah, so if I know that on this road, many car accidents happen on this road, and I say something like, it won't happen to me, so I underweight the probability of loss, and this is what we call risk-seeking. And self-control means that you minimize or even avoid this bias. Another bias is the delay discounting, that we give more weight to immediate rewards than to future rewards. Maybe something like live for today. And that's why we, for example, smoke, because it's rewarding in the short term. It's quite not rewarding or actually punishing in the long term. Another thing is effort discounting. We sometimes give up on good options because they seemingly demand much effort. So if I have self-control, it means that I'm not so risk-seeking, not so delay discounting, and not so effort discounting. And so now I can ask, do people with ADHD underweight the probability of losses? Yeah, okay. If we found that people with ADHD are risk takers, does it happen because they underweight the probability of loss? So experimental way to test it is using gambles, laboratory gambles. And for example, we asked, what do you prefer? 75 euros or something for sure, or 100 points or euros in 50% chance. And people with ADHD, more often than people without ADHD, choose the 150% chance. Yeah, and this is what Deckers analyzed already almost a decade ago, and showed that indeed people with ADHD are more risk-taking here. So they, and it is intuitively interpreted as showing that they are more risk-seeking. They actually underweight the probability of losing the 75 here. But in this example, the safe option is not only safer, but it's actually more optimal. It's more optimal in terms of expected value, yeah, and this 75 instead of only 50. And it's more optimal in a descriptive manner, meaning that most people indeed choose here the 75. So to ask or to test whether ADHD relates to risk seeking, we should take different choices. For example, where safe and risky options are similarly optimal, at least in terms of expected value. So we did a series of experiments and found in general and in all these experiments that when you equalize the value of the risky and the safe option, people with or adolescents with and without ADHD actually make the same choices. So I contacted Ticho Deckers, and who was then a PhD student in the University of Amsterdam, and we reanalyzed or meta-analyzed the data and showed a moderation effect by optimality of the safe option. When the safe option was optimal, indeed ADHD was related to more risk-taking, but when the safe option was not optimal, no relation was found. We took a step further and actually manipulate the optimality. Okay, so in one condition, we had participants, students here, have to choose between like problems like, do you prefer 18 for sure or 20 in 60%? And here the safe option is optimal. Yeah, this is 18 and here is only 12 in terms of expected value. And indeed, people with ADHD made more risky choices. But when we asked them to choose between 6 for sure or 20 in 60% chance, here this is the expected value, here is 6 and here 12, then people with ADHD actually were less likely to choose the risky option. Okay, so actually we concluded, or this data suggested, that people with ADHD are not risk-seeking, but actually suboptimal decision makers. Yeah, they take the less, I mean, they are less likely to take the correct or the more favorable option. We tried. I'm really cautious about it because this is only some kind of pilot result. But Maayan El-Aluf developed a real-life positive risk-taking scale. Questions like, how likely are you on your first day at work to be the one initiating a friendship with a coworker you find interesting? And here, and also she used a negative risk-taking behavior, the same tool developed by Rachel Shon that I mentioned. And she found that whereas ADHD symptoms related to higher negative risk-taking behavior, it was related to lower positive risk-taking behavior. Yeah, so actually it's not about the risk, but about the optimality or making the more optimal choices. In parallel, we investigated or tried to answer the question, do people with ADHD overweight the immediacy of rewards? So are they, as they are very often described, as temporal myopic, or they live only in the here and now and they don't see the long-term rewards? So here again, we started with a meta-analysis here conducted by Marx, and it uses experiments or tasks like this one. You should choose between 24 points or euros today and 55 in 3 weeks. And most of the studies and the overall effect is quite big, that children or people with ADHD more often prefer or choose the 24 today. But here again, delayed option is optimal. Yeah, I mean, here you cannot just, you don't have a simple model to compute the expected value, but you can ask people, and descriptively, most of the people prefer to wait 3 weeks for raising the reward from 24 to 55. But what about these cases? Yeah, 24 today or 30 in 100 days. Okay, here, I guess most of you and most of the population prefers not to wait. So here the optimal choice apparently is not to wait. And what will happen here when we ask people with ADHD to choose, and Ortal Gabrieli Seri is conducting her PhD on this question. And she showed that when the delayed option is optimal, like 24 today or 55 in 3 weeks, then there is quite monotonic negative association between ADHD and choosing the delay option. When the immediate option is optimal, then we don't see linear or monotonic effects, but we see some kind of quadratic effect. But all in all, people with ADHD, and those are here on the on this side of the scale, actually choose the immediate. I mean, choose the optimal. I mean, choose here the delay is the less optimal, so they choose is more than the optimal compared to people without ADHD.
What the crossing do to us?
Sorry?
The crossing between the two.
The crossing is, no, it just, it means that, no, you can't really, yeah, just one, you know, on the other. It's not a crossing. It means that theoretically, I can think of cases where people with ADHD will be very low in choosing the delay choices when delay is optimal, and very high in choosing the delayed choice when it is not optimal. Okay, I'll skip these ones and try to summarize this this part of the talk. So people with ADHD, if they really make suboptimal choices, if the decision making is suboptimal, so they, in some cases, hyper-seeking, in some cases, they are hyper-aversive to risk. They can be much disinhibited, but also too timid. They are procrastinator, but maybe also precrastinator, which is an idea to coin this phenomenon of doing things too early, not waiting for the right time to do it. They are aggressive, but also submissive, uncontrolled, but also over-controlled. Okay, so the next question is why, and here step back to present a very old, actually, not very old, from the previous century, about ADHD, which is consistently inconsistent, or people with ADHD have higher intra-individual variability. Mark Papor was, the first time I saw this term consistently inconsistent in the literature is 1998. Maybe it's not the first time. Probably it's not the first time. And the report himself showed that symptoms of ADHD are not so stable as we used to think. There is quite several papers showing that mood and emotions are quite fluctuative, that there are fluctuations in the quality of sleep or in sleep behavior, also in brain activity, and more related to this talk, in cognitive performance. So there is really big literature on reaction time variability, intra-individual reaction time variability, on attention or inhibition tasks. And also this is more, this is quite rarely appears, but Friedman et al. Showed that also if you measure correctly working memory, you can see that the capacity is less stable in children with ADHD. So, so in contrast to all these kinds of domains, less work was done on judgment and decision making. Quite accidentally, I published something about ADHD and intra-individual variability in time estimation. The paper was not about intra-individual variability, but one of the reviewers demanded this edition, and of course I submitted. And actually I don't know who it was, but I'm very grateful for this important edition. So people with ADHD are more or less consistent in their time estimation. And this is more recently, I collaborated with Meir Berneron from our department, and we asked participants, M2 participants, M2 workers, to estimate how many candies are in the jar, in a series of jars, and then we repeated the same questions with the same jars, and computed the absolute difference between the estimates, which is equivalent to standard deviation, actually. And we showed that the more symptoms of ADHD you had, the larger was the absolute difference. So the IIV was greater. And now I'm coming back to the decision making and ask whether intra-individual variability or noise in preferences may account for the suboptimal decision making we found. So let's start with an example. Suppose we have to decide whether to do something risky, like climbing a fence. Okay, so the decision depends, among other things, on the level of risk. How risky or how high is this fence? And optimally, there is a cutoff. Okay, there is a cutoff. And if the fence is the risk is less risky. If the risk of the fence is lower than the cutoff, so we will take it. So we'll climb the fence. If it's higher than the cutoff, we will not climb the fence. However, people's behavior, people's choices are not deterministic, so it's better be described as a distribution of cutoffs. Okay, so here, if this is a distribution of cutoff around this mean, then on this level of risk, we will most probably, but not deterministically, will take the chance or we take the risk, and if this is the level of the risk, we will probably not take it. And if people with ADHD are risk-seeking, and this is a control distribution, so we should assume that this is how the distribution of cutoffs for a person with ADHD is. Yeah, and this is why where they have a risky choice or risky option, they are more likely to take it. However, according to this distribution, we will predict that when the risk is low, they will be also more likely to take it than controls. But this is not what we found. We found that they are less likely to take it. So we suggested that this is how the distribution of cutoffs of people with ADHD looks like. It is more noisy, okay? Their here estimate of risk or preferences or weight they give to the level of risk is less consistent. So it happens more often that they will take a high risk, but it will also happen more often that they will not take a low level risk. Okay, we thought how to. Oh, okay, I don't have much time. So we computed or tried to make some indices of this preferences consistency or inconsistency. We found that if this model is okay, then people with ADHD have lower preference consistency compared to controls. The same regarding delay choices. I won't get into it. And also, these are all ways or ideas how to measure preferences consistency or inconsistency. And here I show all the cases in which we did show it. For example, just a few words about this one. If I change my preferences, if my preferences are not very consistent, I'm more susceptible to violate transitivity. Yeah, because if A is preferred over B and B over C, and then things have changed, so it may happen that C will be preferred over A. And here we did it with using Tversky transitivity task and showed that indeed the more ADHD symptoms you had, you were more likely to violate transitivity. Okay, two ideas or two directions for educational and clinical implication. First, and this is quite simple. I mean, if performance, cognitive performance is more variable in someone, then it means that measuring it once or twice is less reliable. Okay, so here we showed on a very big sample that variability in test performance is higher in people with ADHD. So it means actually that if you want to make a reliable estimation of cognitive ability for people with ADHD, you should use you should repeat the test more times compared to people without ADHD. And the last idea is regards nudgeability. And nudge is something that Taylor and Sunstein introduced. Yeah, this is when you change something in the situation which does not affect the objective values of the rewards, but it is nevertheless very effective. For example, if you put healthy food in an attractive way, and you put it on in a more accessible shelf, for example, then although you didn't change not the content, not the price of it, nevertheless, you increase the likelihood of this food to be consumed. There is this idea in the nudging literature suggesting that not all the people are sensitive to nudges in the same strength or in the same extent, but it relates to several things, including the strengths of preference. So people whose preferences are less strong, yeah, or less consistent, are actually more nudgeable or more sensitive or more responsive to nudges. The last slide I want to show is that when Shirley Hershko actually advertised either healthy food or unhealthy food, and she advertised it, so made it more attractive and put it on a more convenient shelf in the cafeteria, it did affect, but only students with ADHD, not students without ADHD. So this may be an evidence or some kind of support for the idea that people with ADHD are more nudgeable. And this opens up much or many options for intervention in many life domains. Okay, so I'll summarize with this. So ADHD is linked to maladaptive decision-making in self-control situations. So people with ADHD procrastinate or engage in delinquency and risk-taking behavior more often. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are biased to risk or to immediacy, but rather that it seems that the drive behind it is suboptimal decision-making, and suboptimal decision-making may be accounted for by higher intra-individual variability in preferences. And then I just want to acknowledge my lab members, my collaborators, the funding resources, and to you, of course, for your attendance. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I have two questions, if that's okay. I get that your population is big enough to not be affected by individual, it's big enough. But isn't intelligence also a determining factor between both the control group and the ADHD group?
Okay. Okay, so I'll answer this question. In most of the studies here, I did not control for intelligence. In some of the studies, I did, for example, in the studies of experimental risk-taking in adolescents. Within the ADHD literature, there are always doubts about should we control for intelligence or not, because at least part of intelligence, for example, working memory, is also probably part of the ADHD picture. So it's, but overall, no, and it doesn't seem. I mean, now I'm just answering intuitively. It doesn't seem that people were very, conscious or did some mathematical calculations when it's more intuitive. So it may be also not so much related to intelligence or parts of the intelligence which are less fluid.
Okay, and then my second question, because in your previous slide, there were quite some negative conclusions of the ADHD population. But if it's so negative, why is it still so prevalent? Because wouldn't that be evolved out over millions of years?
Yeah. Okay. So first, I mean, I wouldn't say it's negative. Yeah. I mean, it's not more negative than. I mean, if we take the more traditional account of why do they take more risk, because they are more risk-seeking. Why are they so impulsive? Because they see only. Yeah, and so I just suggest something else. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is not. I mean, this account. I mean, the traditional accounts doesn't explain some of the findings regarding why ADHD is survived. This is it's a very popular question, and I don't think we have a good answer for it. I mean, people suggested that ADHD was very adaptive in some other periods, but most of the data doesn't support this hypothesis. Some people suggested that ADHD is good for the group selection, not for individual selections. And more people from the neurodivergent or social model suggest that this is because the gap between what these people can do and what we ask them to do is too big. Yeah. So I mean, if there are contexts in which people with ADHD can flourish and even function better than people without ADHD, it may be. I mean, I don't think we know such context yet. One last point about it, that there is one cognitive domain, in which it seems now already quite a consistent finding that people with ADHD are better, and this is divergent creativity, and so this is something. This is maybe a direction in which that can lead us to suggest more interesting solutions for people with ADHD.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
What would you think would be like the neurophysical basis for noise in the decision making?
Well, I'm not. I don't know. I mean, there is few papers on focusing on the default mode system or network. Some other on prefrontal circuits. I really don't have any opinion about it.
Good question. So I feel like many traits ADHD people have are kind of similar to, like, if you have trauma, or if you like not well, like if you have depression or something. Like, how can we distinguish that this is like that? Or how do you know that these people didn't have like comorbidity?
Okay, so yeah, this is something that is easier to control for, and in most of the data I showed you, we did measure also either clinical comorbid conditions like depression, anxiety, and on other just in general psychopathology in general, or adaptation problem in general, and we could show that even when we first that the effect of these variables was not so clear, such that ADHD, and also statistically when we control it, we still see the effect of ADHD. But it's a very, actually, I think, good question, good intuition, because people with ADHD, I mean, I'm trying just, thoughts I have in my head, that maybe if higher IIV, higher intra-individual variability, is something central to ADHD, it may really explain why they are so sensitive to emotional contexts, yeah, and why the same person can be actually anxious and like avoid some situations, and on other situations surprisingly he will be very extrovert or acting out or something like this. Yeah, I mean, you find with ADHD, and sometimes in the same child, both anxiety and oppositionality. Yeah, so maybe higher IIV may explain also these associations between ADHD and other conditions. Yeah.
In your slide for the two distribution that you showed, one of them was the Gaussian and the other one was the beta distribution, which is a beta. You have actually seen this, because this would explain many of the things that you're actually sharing with us.
Help me to understand what you mean. You're speaking about?
Yes.
This one?
Yes.
Ah.
So here we have a Gaussian distribution that you said that this is, if the control is going to be behaving, you suppose that it's going to behave.
Well, this is just theoretical, yeah.
Oh, okay, so it has not been actually.
No.
This is the hypothesis that you have.
Yeah, exactly. And my hypothesis is not about the the Gaussian characteristics of the distribution, but I mean that the ADHD, the distribution of people with ADHD is noisier.
This is one,
yeah. But thank you for mentioning it. Yeah, nothing yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. The populations you were reporting about it, ADHD symptoms, but was it the ADHD group? Was it a clinically diagnosed ADHD group? So I know you have different papers here, but my question directs here people with ADHD symptoms, but with a good environmental fit, may don't have the idea of disorder and are very good with their flexibility and their variability and So depending on the context, for example, being a professional where it is important to be receptive of very different stimuli, then maybe it's very good, and then there is not any of the negative outcomes.
Yeah.
So this is what I was asking. Do you see this also in non-clinical referred?
Yeah, I don't know.
Symptoms.
Okay, this is an easy answer. Yeah, I mean, I didn't test this very interesting hypothesis. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, we have these data on people with and without ADHD, clinical ADHD, okay? But you're saying that in those general population studies, some of the people who rated themselves very high are actually very successful. Yeah, I didn't try to zoom in on them. It sounds like a very good future idea. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for you?
So what is the plans of your research here?
Sorry?
What is your plan of research here during your stay?
Ah, okay. So here we started trying to test or the IIV hypothesis of ADHD on other domains and both cognitive and actually non-cognitive. So I generously, Gail and her unit member shared with me some data on motivation, experimental motivation task, or even on movement and the heart rate variability. And we started to analyze these data, asking whether people with ADHD, for example, are not only more hyperactive, but are more variable in movement. Yeah. Yeah, I have really, I hope this collaboration will yield some interesting findings.
For those that weekend, you were at the start, not the end.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I'd like to thank Yehuda very much, not only for today's talk, but his contribution in our research group over the last 5 or 6 weeks, where, you know, he can see it. We've been preparing posters for a conference that's coming up, and we're really focused on intra-individual variability at the moment. So he's had a significant influence in our group. But I just want to thank everybody for coming along today. We know that this is kind of a specialty area. It's our passion, but we know it's not everybody's passion. But I also want to remind you that Yehuda's talked a little bit about ADHD, but all of us show some of the symptoms of ADHD some of the time. You know, I've probably been one of the more inattentive and wriggly people today, but, you know, I've looked around the room and there's been the odd person who has been, you know, a little distracted or a little inattentive. And so I think that's the point that we keep in mind as well. We can talk about it, you know, as separate groups, or we can remember that it is a dimension, and that it kind of goes a little bit to the question about, you know, why ADHD hasn't died out. Well, you know, the truth is we have a little bit of it in all of us, and some of us have more of it than others. But again, I want to thank everybody, and Yehuda's time with us is coming to an end. Tomorrow will be our last day, but I can put you in touch with him. You know, we know where he is, and we're actually off to a conference together in a couple of weeks' time. So we're hoping that this will not be the last visit, but is actually going to just be the first of many interactions. So thank you all very much. And Yehuda, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.